as Western Europe, Russia, and most of Asia were swept by the panic. Credit was disappearing, leaving companies struggling to finance their operations. The evidence of how serious the problems were becoming appeared in different places. Wilmington, where DuPont has its headquarters, is usually a hotbed of legal activity because so many companies are chartered in the state of Delaware and corporate lawsuits are filed in the Delaware Chancery Court in Wilmington. Bookings at the hotel DuPont owns in downtown Wilmington plunged by more than 30% in 10 days, as lawyers representing companies engaged in litigation canceled their reservations when their clients decided to settle their disputes and stop incurring legal fees. More telling was the rate at which production at many companies was slowing. DuPont paint covers over 30% of American automobiles, and the company generally manufactures the paint less than 48 hours before it is sprayed onto new cars. To maintain that short a lead time, the automobile companies share their production schedules with DuPont. Suddenly, there weren't any production schedules. The automakers didn't know what they were going to produce in the face of collapsing sales. Clearly, it was time to take action. DuPont has long been in the forefront of contingency planning. It has a plan dubbed the Corporate Crisis Plan that, if invoked, instantly brings together DuPont's senior managers to appraise the cause of the crisis and put appropriate disaster control procedures in place. The plan is seldom called up. It was used in the wake of the 9/11 attacks and in the aftermath of major hurricanes. Holliday had to weigh whether the gathering financial storm was serious enough to warrant implementing it, or whether declaring a crisis might frighten the company's 60,000 employees needlessly. As the evidence for a deepening economic downturn quickly mounted, he decided that corporate crisis was right. The plan immediately brought together the 17 standing teams that always assemble when a crisis is declared. Over the course of 4 days, it became clear that the nature of the crisis was only financial, and 8 teams were stood down. At the end of the 4 days, the remaining 9 had determined what needed to be done to ensure DuPont's viability. It was time to let the troops around the world know what was going on. Communications with employees took several forms. Holliday enlisted the company's chief economist and the head of its pension fund, both of whom are highly regarded in the company, to explain in non-technical language the roots of the crisis and the way it was affecting the company. The pension fund manager also took time to develop some instructional material, advising employees about investment options for the $18 billion in retirement funds. Within 10 days of the formulation of plans to deal with the crisis, every employee in DuPont had a face-to-face meeting with a manager who explained what the company needed to do. Each employee was asked to identify 3 things he or she could do immediately to help conserve cash and reduce costs. Within a few days after the communications program was rolled out, the company conducted polling to see how well employees understood the nature of the crisis, determine their psychological reaction, were they scared or were they energized and ready to confront the crisis, and see whether they actually were doing what they needed to be doing. Overall, the employees seemed to get it. It helped that the news media were full of stories about the developing financial crisis. The actions aimed at conserving cash were taking hold quickly. Travel was curtailed sharply, internal meetings were canceled, and consultants and contractors were eliminated where possible. Nevertheless, Holliday had a feeling that people still didn't grasp the urgency with which they needed to be acting. In hindsight, maybe we were too good at giving them the reassurance and confidence that we could come through this, Holliday said. We gave them so much confidence that they just weren't responding as fast as the slowdown demanded. Together with his CEO and CFO, Holliday took the time to spend an hour and a half with each of the company's top 14 leaders. They were asked to explain what they were doing to cope with the crisis. They all brought long lists and seemed to feel confident that they were doing a lot, but the problem was how fast it was getting done. They were talking about things that would be implemented by January or February, but they were things we needed to implement in October, Holliday said. Even as the immediate crisis measures were being put in place, DuPont had a 3-person team of top executives looking at longer-term actions the company needed to take. It would take a while to figure out which production facilities could be closed permanently or shuttered temporarily to reduce costs. But the fastest way to save the most cash was to cut back as much as possible on the overhead.